On today's Dirt, we have Brett Roper, Medicine Man Technologies. Join us as we chat about Medicine Man Technologies, a publicly traded company, new technology in cannabis industry, new states going legal, and how brands are going to affect the market in the future. Join us today on The Real Dirt. This is Chip Baker with The Real Dirt, and on today's Dirt, I have Brett Roper from Medicine Man Technologies. How's it going, Brett?
Doing good, Chip. How about yourself?
Oh, doing great. Thanks for coming this morning. Many of my cannabis guests don't like to show up at 9 o'clock.
Well, I'm usually in the office by 6 or 6:30, so
right. Well,
9 works for me well.
In the future, we can do it even earlier if you want. Then I'm an early riser myself. Brett, what is your position at Medicine Man Technologies?
Right now, I'm functioning as the company's CEO. Andy and I, when we first established the company back in 2014, flipped a coin for CEO and COO, and I still think he used a two-headed coin on me, but it was fine because one of us had to have that role, and he had a little bit better presence in the industry, so it worked out very well for him to start with that.
Right.
And then I served as the chairman of the board for several years, and then he's now our board chairman and has stepped to that role, and I've just picked up the CEO role as of June.
Sure. So Medicine Man Technologies is a publicly traded company you're the CEO of. You're a Nevada-based company, but you're operating out of Denver.
Right. We're a Nevada C Corp.
Me and Brett met a number of years ago at their dispensary wing of their facility, and then we've seen each other at shows over the years. I've run into many of your clients throughout the country that you've helped establish new cannabis businesses in many different ways. You guys seem to be everywhere. How many states are you in?
Right now, I believe we're in 14. We're also in Puerto Rico, and we're also a few other international spots.
Oh, wow. 14. I thought you were going to say like 7 or something.
We've been paid by people in 14 different states. That's all I know.
So consulting can often have leave a bad taste in people's mouth. It rings wrong, but what you guys are doing is different than what we would consider the normal consultant in this industry. You guys, Medicine Man Technology, came from Medicine Man Dispensary, Medicine Man Cultivation. You were one of the pioneers in cultivation and dispensary operations here in Denver, Colorado. And then one day someone called you up and said, "Hey, can you help me start a license?" Is that kind of how it worked?
Actually, I had a relationship with a company that leased Pete and Andy the building. And at the time had kept up with them through the general contractor I introduced them to. It was actually me contacting Pete and Andy after I saw the latest grow, which they brought online in late 2014 and 15, the very clean apple room looking facility.
Right.
And I said, "What are you guys doing to monetize all this great experience?" And I think Andy's comment was, "We barely have time to sleep and scratch our butt, but if you know something we don't know, we'd be thrilled to talk with you." So we basically partnered up and over about a year and a half developed their SOPs and got them ready to launch as a real business, which occurred technically March the 22nd of 14 is when we incorporated, and we got our first clients starting in April of that year as well.
So you don't come from a cannabis background. You come from a business background.
That's correct. Business and real estate and service industry components.
Right. Let's talk about the public company, MedMan Technologies. There's been so much excitement on I'll call it the penny stock. Is that the correct?
Sure.
Okay, the penny stock market in the cannabis industry. So much excitement, but it's really kind of confusing to so many people. What's this penny stock? Why isn't it traded in the New York Stock Exchange? Explain to me how it works as if I don't know what's going on.
Right. So the OTC marketplace is more or less the incubator or the on-ramp for companies that want to eventually work their way up to a higher listing. And a higher listing would either be through the NASDAQ or through the NYSE. You can look at dual listings and go offshore to other countries, but that's pretty much not done much to my knowledge, at least in the cannabis space. Mm-hmm. As we moved ahead and consider our options, we've always worked towards helping ourselves to be knowledgeable in the space so that we could take advantage of the public company side that is what's known as a QB or QX status. So when we first established Medicine Man Technologies, we founded the company with the concept that we would be public and profitable in trading within a couple of years. But we would always step into the public market as a fully reporting company, not a Pinks or a Grays or one of the lesser listings. Not that those companies are good, bad, or indifferent. It just seems that for the most part, you find more manipulation at that level.
Absolutely.
And you certainly will find manipulation at the NYSE and then the NASDAQ levels. It's just very subtle, and dark pools, and Warren Buffett deciding he wants to buy a big chunk of a company is likely going to stir some pretty good interest in that company.
So you brought up that how some of the other stocks aren't fully reporting. You know, one of the interesting things about your company in the cannabis space, and people ask me all the time, hey, what stock can I invest in the cannabis space? Many of the companies don't actually produce any goods or do any business, right? That's what I've noticed. But companies like Kush Bottles, Medicine Man Technologies,
TerraTech,
I'm giving a blank on a couple of the others that actually make something or do something. You guys make money. You actually make money.
Right. Well, some years we do and some years we don't.
Okay.
But our goals are profit-oriented for sure.
I should say this. You have a business of consulting people. You have a product you sell, right? You do sign people up for contracts. In many of the publicly traded companies, it's just hype, right? And there's no real business that's happening. It's what they say they're going to do.
Yes, it's a little bit like the Dilbert effect. Wally was going to go public with his tuna fish sandwich company and got the trophy wife, and quickly found out there was no online tuna fish sandwich market that he could serve after getting VC capitalists to give him millions of dollars. So it's that hype exists in every industry. It just tends to exist more at the onset of that industry's traction. So you saw that in the late 90s with the internet. So between 90 and 98, 99, before it all slowed down and people went away from that craze into more operating company modes. You have that same thing going on here. So it's early for the cannabis industry. There are people that claim to touch or to have something to do with the cannabis industry that are hyping or pumping or talking or doing constant press releases to try to get somebody's attention. Medicine Man Technologies, for example, a lot of companies make a public announcement every time they get one client.
Right.
I do that once a quarter, and I'll announce that I got 12 clients this quarter, and I've done this and I've done that.
Right, because so much of that game is hype.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, we're doing this, and then people are excited about it, and then they buy their stock. And
I won this award, or I did this. And some of those are certainly noteworthy and need to be a part of a press release strategy. But in this industry, it's better if you don't do press releases just because you need to do one every week or every other day.
Absolutely.
You do them when they're relevant and they're material to your company's operations.
The hype of the press release, the news stories, the CNN interviews, that makes people excited about the stock, so they go and buy it. It raises the price of the stocks. And that's kind of what we're talking about here, is this marketing sales technique that's used by many companies to say something every day or every third day about what they're doing.
Right. Well, you see a lot of folks in the space such as a Kush Bottles, and Nick, has a press release every now and then, but Nick's not out every week, maybe not even every other week or every third week, but he's out there when he needs to announce something that's relevant, or there was an 8K filing that he's required to make per SEC regulations because it's a material event for his company. So he doesn't, he typically doesn't announce that, I sold, 10,000 recharge bags today to a company, because that's really not material or relevant to his business.
Right. So Medicine Man Technologies, publicly traded company. It's MDCL.
Correct.
On the QTC. You're
on the OTC.
On the OTC. You're a fully reporting QB status.
Right. So within the OTC marketplace, there are audit levels called, the PCAOB audit level is required to be on the QB or QX status. If you're a Pinks or a Gray or other listing on the OTC, audits are not required.
Right.
At least not PCAOB audits, and the reporting is far less stringent.
Right, and that's where the dubiousness can take place, and the Pinks
it can
and the
take
place,
place, almost anywhere, but it's more likely to take place.
You don't have to report what you're doing with your income.
Exactly. Well, there are a lot of interesting companies companies out there, MJNA and some of these others that have been pinks for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And they've made several releases that they're going to move up to the QX status, that they are going to get their financials audit worthy. And hopefully at some point they're able to meet those goals and objectives. Once again, the OTC marketplace is an incubator or an on-ramp for public companies that aspire to higher listings and more longevity.
Right.
So those that are able to transition from pinks to fully reporting and maybe to QX and maybe to a capital markets listing on the NYSE, which is the on-ramp for the NYSE, or a similar level for the NASDAQ. These are all steps that legitimate businesses try to take in order to grow their company.
Right. And the SEC set this up this way so that, me, Johnny Q Public, could start a business and start it with a small amount of money, build it myself, not report it, then start reporting, which costs a good amount of money to report,
Sure.
and then move from this penny stock to the NASDAQ. Right.
Penny stocks typically are those stocks that trade at less than $3 to $4 per share.
Right. It's a
And
misnomer, they're
the
pennies.
NASDAQ and the NYSE, is a part of their uplisting requirements. You have to support a certain level of trading at a certain price for a time period in order to be eligible to even make application to either of those exchanges. So generally speaking, a penny stock, while a penny is a penny, they're referring to stocks that are traded in less than that $3 to $4 range.
Absolutely. So what MedMan Technology's trading at today?
We've been running in the $1.35 to $1.45 range.
Okay.
The company only sold stock privately one time. We raised a little bit of money in November of 2014.
Okay.
We did a private placement where we went to friends and family to put some additional funds at our ready if we needed them. And actually, we didn't hardly use them for about a year and a half, but we raised money at $1 a share. It was a $10,000 minimum maximum. And we sent it out to 50 friends and family, and we got 27 subscribers day one. And we closed it at that point because we were going to stop at 25.
Oh, yeah.
So we did that as a purposeful move because typically FINRA, and FINRA is also Financial Regulatory Authority, is also part of the framework that watches over the public and private company space. So the SEC, FINRA, Depository Trust Corporation, which clears stock and manages the stock allocations and reporting, those are all critical to managing the business as a whole.
Right. Wow. So there's a tremendous amount of reporting.
Sure.
Filings. It got some great accountants. My accountants are incredible. And one thing they advised me years ago was never go public, Chip. It's just too much stuff. Right. Just too much reporting. But that's your biggest challenge, huh?
Right. But it's also our biggest advantage. When we make an opportunity come together with another possible acquisition, that company knows if we offer them X amount of stock and it says of this date, we're actually offering them a value that is there and is you can see it and you can understand it. Now, what that value is 6 months or 6 years, you have the same risk in a private transaction.
Sure.
You can buy a company and 2 months later it's worth a third of what it was, or 2 months later it's worth 3 times what it was.
Right.
But in the public company space, if we make an offer for a company in terms of stock, they know what that value was, and that value is set and tangible. And hopefully as a company that's growing, they see the value of coming into our group and then hopefully seeing our stock improve in price, and they get to see the appreciation as well.
Right, absolutely. So you're a publicly traded company, but you release shares out privately. Is that how you phrase it?
No, we only release shares as a result of either a qualified plan, an acquisition, or contract for services. So we just engaged a company called KCSA out of New York for IR and PR work. Their fee structure is both cash and some stock. We like to see people that work with us for investor relations and public relations have the same incentive that we have in growing our stock's value.
Right.
So
absolutely.
in working with...
They got skin in the game.
Exactly. So working with that group, it was easy for us to, and that's been disclosed already, but it was easy for us to get them on board and agree to a price that also included some stock so that if they do a good job, they get rewarded. And of course, if they do a good job, our shareholders get rewarded.
Right, absolutely. Hey, Brett, I think it's a perfect time for us to take a break. This is Chip Baker, The Real Dirt, and Brett Roper with Medicine Man Technology. These new episodes are made possible through some really awesome partnerships. We want to form long-term relationships with other entities who have similar goals. Thanks to Grower Soil, a line of soil and nutrients manufactured and developed right here in Colorado. Also, thanks to Cultivate Colorado with 2 stores in the Denver metropolitan area. Cultivate has one of the largest selections of indoor horticultural equipment in the known universe. So stop by if you have any growing needs. Grow your dreams, cultivate your legend. And we're back. I'm talking to Brett Roper with Medicine Man Technologies. So when I was 13, my dad came to me, real smart guy, 8th grade education, but just really, really bright guy. Could build anything, do anything in my eyes. And he said, okay, had a job now for a couple of years, right? You've been in, I made you save half your money. I want you to invest in some stock and let's learn about the stock market, right? And I was, asshole little 13-year-old kid. I saw my savings and I wanted to buy like a skateboard or a ninja suit or something, like that with it. And so I invested $1,600 in Coca-Cola. I invested $1,600 in Coca-Cola stocks and watched it for a number of years, learned about publicly traded companies. Every quarter we'd read the filings, right, and statements, and I really learned how it worked. And then I forgot about it for a number of years. When I was 24, I looked at my stocks. I got a letter, and then I hadn't looked at it in 5 or 6 years, and it was $25,000 it had grown from that $1,300 investment, right? And I was floored, right? And I called my dad up and said how excited I was, and I was ready to spend the money immediately.
Spend a little.
I did. I took half of it. I took half of it, sold it, moved to California.
There you go.
Just got out of college, and me and my girlfriend at the time, is now my wife, that's how we made our start.
Oh.
Was with this $1,300,
Nest
odd
egg.
job nest egg that I'd started when I was 13. And took $10,000 or something and moved to California.
Well, sounds like a great story.
Yeah. I should have sold all of it though, because Coca-Cola stock then like plummeted, and it's never been worth the same amount of money.
It's unusual in that what they used to call the widows and orphans stocks, the GM and the Ford and those larger stocks that paid a continual dividend and saw a little appreciation. Those were stocks back in the day that you called the broker and said, buy me 1,000 shares. I'll send you a check, or I'll send you the check first and make sure the fund's clear before the broker actually did the transaction.
Right.
But the trading velocities and mechanisms have changed since the time you made your $1,300 investment, where your dad probably turned you onto a broker that you went down to and you wrote a check and he put it in your trading
exactly
account.
How it happened. Right.
He went out and bought the shares on the open market through his intermediary on the NYSE out in New York. And then they got credited to your account. Back in the day, they would have actually done that manually. And the certificate would have been held in a file cabinet somewhere,
right,
as a trust for your shares that you held. Nowadays, it's all electronic.
Right. You can do it on your phone.
Once you clear that stock and it's left its physical certificate form, which is usually at the very beginning, at that point, it's going to remain in the ether, or as a little blip of data on somebody's server that has a tracking number and a history to it.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. I got exposed to E-Trade like 2013, 14, right when cannabis was being legalized recreation here in Colorado. And at that point, there was a tremendous rise in a lot of the public stocks. Right. There weren't that many on the market that have served the test of time. But yeah, we bought it. We bought a bunch of stocks, on our phone. We're looking at it every day, looking at it, right, selling them, buying more, selling them, buying more. And it was incredibly fun. Right. And around January 2014, I think we sold most of it. We're like, okay, made like $20,000 or something. Right. And it's exciting for us.
Right.
So we're like, okay, we're going to sell it. And then 2 months later, all of that stuff crashed.
Yeah.
Right. It was literally worth dollars again.
Right. Well, it's amazing. Some of that comes back around in the public market space. One company's demise doesn't mean it's gone.
Absolutely. No.
It is now eligible to become a shell, and it gets sold to somebody else. It used to be parakeet food, and now it's going to be cannabis.
Absolutely.
And those reverse mergers and those types of arrangements are generally done to get a company to market quicker. But even if you're buying a shell or you're investing in a company that way, you have risk because without what's called a Delaware scrub or a bankruptcy for discharge to know who your shareholders are, the stories are pretty grim for all these companies that they thought they bought a good shell. And, 6 months after they're done and they're getting ready to trade, somebody shows up and waves a certificate that says, I own, 2 million shares of your stock. And they're, well, guess what? They don't have a choice. It's the documentation is there. Failure to disclose that the transaction is, smack on the wrist, or do you derail all that time and effort? Typically, no, you
just pay off.
You pay off or you find a way to make it work. So it's in the shell game, which is usually not the most desirable way to go public. It's very critical that if you're getting a fully reporting shell, that you make sure that it's clean and you do your due diligence so that it doesn't have a nest of additional shares that were given or authorized or in play that are not disclosed on the books. There are book entry stocks a lot of times that if somebody's less than ethical on what they do, you can end up buying a little bit of a pig in a poke.
Right. And you guys didn't buy a pre-existing company. You did not do a reverse merger.
No, we established ourselves early on as a C Corp with the idea of filing what's called an S1. Our options to go public were really a Form 10 or an S1. Both are registration statements. An S1 registers a stock that is eligible to be registered to become free trading or freely transferable. A Form 10 basically brings all the stock into the market regardless of its status. And over time, as it becomes eligible to be released for free trading, it does so. So most companies that have a more legitimate foundation, on a normal basis would look at a Form 10 or an S1 filing.
Right. So, we could talk about this all day. This is fascinating to me. I love all aspects of business, but the publicly traded aspect is a huge portion of your business, but that's not what you guys do. You consult people on technology and how to get involved in new business and in new states. Right.
So for the most part, we made our bones, if you will, selling consulting services. We're not a Vicente Sederberg. We don't show up and write an application and take full responsibility. We're the bolt up for that application. So your ex-brother-in-law in California probably is not going to be listed as your grower in a state coming online because his experience is not considered relevant to the industry, and he was perhaps growing less than legally.
Right.
So people that have that desire to get in the space, that have the money and the interest, will come to a company like ours because they can stand on our shoulders.
Right.
We give them the SOPs. We give them the bolt-ups for the application, but we typically don't write an application. We recommend to clients that they get good technical writers, good people that understand persuasive writing skills, that have maybe written RFPs and RFQs for the DOH or whoever is handling the state's administration of the cannabis initiative, and that they also find good security plan contractors, local resources as they can. And we're just one part of a number of pieces that go into the final application process.
Right. So you advise people on a number of things. So one thing that's beautiful about the cannabis industry is almost anybody who's ever smoked a joint has wanted to make $1 million with it. Because it's the coolest thing in the world. And they're like, we can grow this shit, make $1 million.
Right.
But, many people have that idea and want to pursue it, but realize they don't have the backgrounds or the foundations to do it. They might, just like you said, their brother-in-law is growing weed in the basement. They've got 4 lights or, 2 lights or 10 lights or some plants in the backyard, but they want to get legal. So the smart thing to do is to contact somebody who's done it really well, right? And has shown a foundation in this. And that's who's talking to you. Right. That's your customer.
And generally speaking, there are a lot of good consultants in the space. We've worked, as we've already mentioned, the Denver Consulting Group acquisition that's fixing to close here shortly. But we've worked in the industry long enough, and there are a lot of really good consultants out there. We've found some of the better practitioners are actually doing this with one of their ancillary companies. So if I'm providing cultivation advice, I better be a grower, or some of my key team members better be active in the growing technology space so that I'm giving the most relevant and the most current guidance I can possibly provide. Because the old days were 2 pounds a light, a gram a watt was a typical good yield on cultivation,
Not
5-6 turns a year. And with Josh's technology, we're pushing in the 4+ pound range, or pushing 2 grams a watt on normal turns.
Right.
So at the end of the day, it is a manufacturing process.
Absolutely.
And the low-cost, highest-quality producers will likely stand the test of time. And for our clients, while we founded ourselves on Andy and Pete Williams's growing skills, they've been superseded now by our relationship with Josh Hopt, which Andy will tell you he's actually adopting his facility to use Josh's technology because he's a big devotee as well. He sees the difference.
The proof is in the pudding at Josh's
Exactly.
place for sure. We're talking about Josh Happ with 3 Alight. He was on a show just last week or the week before, as a matter of fact. And I've seen hundreds of gardens, Brett. Hundreds of gardens. I've been studying cannabis for 30 years. And I'll go into people's gardens and they look a little different every time. And they might always look good, but the grower will say, oh, I'm having this problem or that problem. And Josh may say the same thing, but as I've been into his facility, he's got 29 grow rooms. I've been to his place 7 or 8 times. Every single time it looks better than the time before.
Right.
It's incredible at the consistency that he is able to do. Right.
Well, and he's all about, a very consistent approach to nutrient management, to light management, to cultivation management. They do something.
It's not just one thing.
Right. It's a combination. It's his 9-spoke wheel, if you will, of cultivation. One of the things they do that's unusual is they call it a schwazz.
Sure.
Where they strip the plant down day one of flower. And most growers would tell you the plant's going to rebel. It's going to go to sleep on you. It's going to hermaphrodite. It's going to not do what you expect it to do.
Underperform.
But he replaces those fan leaves with a nutrient base that's very consistent that allows those plants to thrive. Even though they've been challenged a bit, they come back pretty strong.
Yeah, absolutely. We sell his product at our store and we have his book, 3 Alight book. And many of our employees go through it and they see 1 or 2 things that they want to grab, and he's got lots of great little tidbits of information, but the swazzing coupled with the nutrient, like that's, you got to do those 2 things together.
You do. And environment is very critical as well. So CO2 uptake is always better weeks 4, 5, 6, whatever that time frame is. So when you dial up your CO2 to that 1,500 level, parts per million on extra augmented CO2, then you're getting your best reports. You're obviously not using CO2 in veg because the plant's not mature enough to have flowers, and the CO2 does help production in the flower stage.
Sure.
So he's just really worked that out pretty much.
Yeah. And I mean, his grow rooms really look like almost any other grow room I go to that has put a high level into controlling the environment. It's really his technique and application of technology that everyone else is still using, right? But it's just the way they put it together that makes it work.
Right. Josh runs many nutrients throughout the plant's life expectancy, and a lot of your large growers, a lot of your larger growers want to just run 2 or 3, and they want to be able to use automation. They feel like they can treat every plant the same. And Josh has been very discriminatory, and I think that's why he gets the yields he gets. It costs him a little bit more to get those, but would you rather spend an extra $200 a pound and get 4 pounds of light?
Yeah.
Or are you happy to save that 200 and get 2.5?
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. So Josh is just, maybe we should step back here because we've kind of talked about you guys as a consulting company, but you're also a brand warehouse. You are, and you alluded to this earlier, you're buying, or maybe buying's not the right term. Partnering with other companies such as Josh at 3 Alight with his
Success
Nutrients, and you have others. Let's talk about those.
Right. So the company's first acquisition announcement was a year ago, this past August, when we announced that we had a deal in principle through a binding term sheet with Josh Hopt for 3 Alight and Pono Publications and Success Nutrients. Pono Publications and Success Nutrients are his 2 corporations. The 3 Alight is a registered trademark and brand of Pono and Success. We also announced at the same time we were moving ahead with the potential acquisition of a packaging company, Garrett Fortune and Funksack. Over a period of 4 to 5 months, the acquisition with Garrett and Funksack just didn't work out for both parties, and we parted friends. And in fact, we lent them $250,000, so we were still good friends to this day because we have a vested interest in their success.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the time, it didn't make sense for a lot of reasons, and none of them were the fault of either party.
Yeah, that's how it
However,
goes.
Josh and his acquisition was one that we pursued, and we basically completed that as of April 1 effective, but the SEC in its infinite wisdom decided we need to add that to our proxy for annual meeting rather than taking the majority shareholder vote that we'd already polled and gotten for whatever reason. So we went and it was finalized on June the 3rd. But for all intents and purposes, they were in our financials and reported that way starting April 1st, which we had already disclosed to the SEC since our deal was technically done back in February.
Right.
So once we absorbed that company, and we're still working to absorb them because there's a lot of moving parts, we'd also begun looking into Denver Consulting Group. And we made an offer to them, Justin and Greg, and we'd made an offer to them in May, and we're hoping to get that closed a week from Friday. But we got our due diligence done. We have their financial statements so that they're PCOB compliant and they're audit ready so they can be uploaded into our financials, which is a part of the requirement on an acquisition. Now, it took us a little longer for Josh's company because there were a lot more moving parts, and it was more expensive for the company to get his books, if you will, up to the spec.
Right.
But at the end of the day,
big business.
We were able to do that successfully, and there were nothing that we were alarmed about in our due diligence process, so we moved ahead. We're currently talking to some other companies, and I believe we disclosed one group in an 8K back in June in Canada that's talking to us about being our exclusive nutrient and service representative in Canada. So we have been exchanging documents with that group as disclosed in the last 8K in June, and we're hoping that that will mature and become something that we can report on. If not, it'll go by the wayside. But you look at a lot of deals before you find the ones that work.
Right.
We're also working with another group as disclosed on the extraction manufacturing side. So we're in deep discussions with them on their technology and their skills, and bringing them in as one of our partners or as a stock for their company deal. So
this is all ancillary products. You're not direct. It's not directly with the plant.
Right now, we're not, although within our filings, we've already disclosed that we have a tacit agreement with the Williams family for possible acquisition. We'll obviously be actively supporting the state initiative that may allow public company ownership, because right now Colorado has a prohibition. But we're hopeful that next year Colorado will look at that and look at a fully reporting public transparent company as being an even better shepherd and steward of that company's money than a private company that doesn't have to disclose anything.
Absolutely.
So we're very hopeful the state will look on that option kindly. And once again, when you look at a fully reporting audited company that's current on its filings, that transparency we think is something the state should be excited about. So we're hopeful that they'll modify their rules to allow a certain level of public company ownership, at least at that QB or QX status level.
Yeah, that never really made sense to me, because the way that Colorado designed all their laws, it was with transparency. It's hard here to divert product. It's hard here to have bad employees or unregistered employees. I know it can be done, I'm sure, but they really thought about a lot of stuff. And it seems like publicly traded companies fit right into that realm.
Well, we believe they do, and we're hopeful that the state and the legislature will look at this opportunity next year and perhaps come up with a solution that would allow us to own and perhaps operate. Right now, you had Derek Peterson and TerraTech, who announced late last year that they were buying Bloom. And that was one of the first instances where you have a QX or QB status company who reported to the SEC their intention to buy a touching the plant company, because they own dispensaries, cultivations, and extraction mechanisms. And we were all quite surprised that in March the 8K went effective, and the SEC basically, I think, by not derailing the acquisition, by their quiet acquiescence, basically said, look, if you're doing it with an estate that's legal, you're keeping it out of the hands of minors, and you're keeping it into your state, and you have a robust state infrastructure that can kind of manage it, then far be it from us to come back and say you can't touch the plant. So a lot of us in the industry got very excited when that happened late last year, and we were all thrilled for Derek and for TerraTech. We believe that's a good acquisition for them, and hopefully that company will begin to show some profit potential here in the near future.
Profit is one of my favorite subjects. Hey, I think it's perfect time for a break, and we're going to come back and speak just about that. This is Chip Baker with The Real Dirt, Brett Roper. You can download this and other episodes on iTunes at The Real Dirt Podcast or on therealdirt.com. We'll be back in a moment. Denver NORML is an organization that advocates for the rights of every marijuana consumer in the Mile High City, while also creating long-lasting partnerships with local businesses that share our values, a deep love for the community, the cannabis plant, and a commitment to educate our audiences. Thanks, Denver NORML. All right, and we're back. This is Chip Baker and Brett Roper with Medicine Man Technologies. My listeners really want to hear about two things. They want to hear about weed and weed money. Right. Now, I said this earlier, about how people want to make $1 million with cannabis, and you've seen people do it, and I've seen people do it. Maybe you have some insight for our listeners as something that you might see in the cannabis industry as a good opportunity to be involved in right now, or maybe like where a good revenue is being made in the cannabis industry right now.
Well, I think if you look at the last couple of either New Frontiers or the BDS Analytics reports, the largest growth seems to have come in investment capital into the cultivation space. However, the extracted products lines are making a really strong run as well. So Colorado, going back 4 years ago, probably 90% of its sales were plant related and 10% or less were extraction related. Mm-hmm. This year, they're talking about maybe as high as 40% of the products sold will be an extracted based product, whereas 60% will still be flower. And what we see is a trend that doesn't mean that you're smoking less flower. What we see is a new trend of new users or new curious folks that say, I would never smoke it because of the carcinogenic effects of tobacco and other things that I fear.
The extracts you can vape.
But if I could ingest it, or I could vape a pure oil where I know I'm not getting some other element thrown in, I'm interested. Plus, there are people like myself. I've always been somewhat of a, I stay between the lines. The lines are my friend. Because it was illegal and because I didn't have an interest in it, I would have stayed on.
But you look like such a stoner with the tie dye and the Rasta
long
haircut.
Hair,
right?
It's all giving me away, obviously. But what you find is you find trends in this industry. So as you look at private and public company investment, because that's really the only two venues you have.
Right, absolutely.
There is no real federal support for a real fund that would be dedicated by Wall Streeters for $2 billion to do nothing but cannabis. So there are no other investment vehicles out there. So groups like ArcView, who've been around a while, they have an investor group. It's an accredited group of people that meet 6 or 7 times a year that talk about investments in the cannabis, and sometimes they invest in your company and sometimes they don't. But when you're starting to look for opportunity, first off, if it's private and somebody comes to you and says, I got the latest and greatest thing, do your homework, do your investigative work. And we would tell people never invest retirement money, never invest, your kids' college education money. Invest your lunch money. Invest a couple of car payments or invest what you have to lose. Don't be swooned away from your money because it seems like something of real value. And of course, once in a great while, it's like playing cards. Once in a great while, you have to fold even though you have the winning hand.
Right.
And the same can be said for investment in cannabis. Limit your losses when you can and take advantage of gains that you're able to create with the right investments. So in the public company space, you have companies that actually do generate revenues, that those revenues are trending in a positive direction and they appear to be growing. And over time, they expect to be more profitable, which means hopefully their stock will get better traction and will appreciate and provide a return to somebody. So most of the investment coming in now is I don't buy the stock to get a dividend. I might lend a cannabis company some money and get paid interest, but likely I'm lending it because I'm helping them buy their newest air conditioning or their newest lights or the newest extractor. And I'm just kind of bidding out some of the capital that they maybe don't have in order to help them increase their reach. So in the public company space, it's really, there's a wide variety of opportunities. And you look at volume, you look at price, you look at volatility, you look at how, good the company is at disclosing both good and bad things if they're subject to good and bad things. And at the end of the day, all those things will help you as an investor make a determination that, hey, I like Medicine Man Technologies, but I don't expect their stock to triple this week or next month.
Right.
But I think over the next 2 or 3 years, based upon what I've read and they've disclosed to me, that they have a really good potential to grow their company. And where it's $1.40 today, it was at one time last October, November, pushing close to $5. Now, I'll be the first one to say we didn't deserve being worth $5.
Right.
We were never a $5 stock. So when the stock began climbing, as an officer and director of the company, that's my worst nightmare because I know the only way to come or to go after that is for it to fall back down again.
Right.
The fact that we opened up as $1 a share and I had us pegged at $1 to $1.50 a share stock, we're right there today, and I'm very comfortable with our stock price. But I feel like over the next several years, we're going to see substantial appreciation of that value and substantial growth in our revenues, which will help drive interest in our shares. So whether you're looking at us, Kush Bottles, TerraTech, American Cannabis, there are a number of people out there, but the one person I would also tell your investors to talk to is Alan Brockstein with 420 Market Fee folks. So Alan is an ex-Kidder Peabody analyst. He has a website. If you just Google 420 Market Fee, MARKETFY, you'll find Alan, and I subscribe. I pay my $420 a year, but Alan has a really good sound basis for judgment and analytics. So if he doesn't like you, he'll tell you.
Right.
If he thinks the stock is being pumped, he will tell you. A couple of weeks ago, he made a comment about Mass Roots and the fact that they had some unknown support that Isaac obviously didn't know about at the time, but there was somebody working his stock. And as the CEO of the company, you've got to keep up on that stuff and watch the reports. And, Isaac, clearly the company didn't authorize the support, but one of the shareholders or somebody got together and put some money into 2 or 3 groups that then kind of pumped the stock for a while.
Sure. And
so you're
pumping it is they buy and sell frequently on a day, and that increases your daily trade share. So it increases your overall value. They increase the value and then they sell.
Well, hopefully that's what happens. A lot of times they don't get any extra traction. The stock languishes and you spent your money for support that didn't get you anywhere. So Isaac's just one example, and Mass Roots, obviously with its latest acquisition, hopefully it will continue to do well, and it'll get to the point where it has some good revenues that it can grow its company on. But, all these companies have, opportunities embedded within them, and it's, you just kind of have to look around and discover which one you think has that best opportunity. So Alan Brockstein, by way of example, we were put into his focus list. The day that he bought our stock for his focus list and his little holding base, within 30 minutes, his followers, we jumped up over 100,000 shares of volume in 30 minutes.
Wow.
We were lucky to do 20,000 shares a day. So Alan, while he's not a promoter,
he has influence.
He has influence, but what Alan does is every time he buys or sells, he makes that announcement to all of his subscribers. So he's a little bit like a Mad Money of Gene Kramer. He obviously doesn't hold for personal, but he's there to talk about the industry as a whole. And what we found is with Alan, if he's comfortable with your stock and feels like you're doing the right things and doing all the right parts, he's not going to come out and promote you, but he's going to say, well, this is a company I like a little bit better. They actually have revenue. They seem to have a good plan.
He can analyze it.
Exactly. He said for us, they may have overpaid for Josh and 3Light and Pono Publications success, but hopefully that works out for him. And then he comes back, 2 months later and says, I think they got a hell of a deal on Denver Consulting Group. Because I look at some of the other consultants in the space and I see their market cap and their value, and I see what they're buying DCG for. And I think that was a really astute purchase.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have people like that will help influence and give guidance. So like I say, I dance into Alan's site once a day and look at the boards and see who's talking about what. And once in a while, I'll make a comment, but my handle in that is MDCL CEO. So if I make a comment, they know exactly who's making that comment.
Sure. Sure. I'm going to join that group. I think that's an interesting one to join.
Alan's got his followers have grown. And when the markets are up, obviously subscriptions for him obviously grow. But Alan's been a very consistent fixture over the last 4 years in the space. And when the markets are doing well, he's warning people about this one doesn't sound right, or this one's not going the right way, or these guys just filed a Form 4 and they just awarded themselves 20 million shares, or this company's got 10 million shares coming out from restriction. Watch out, it's going to be under pressure. So, ArcView, Alan Brockstein's 420 Market Fee or our index. Sure. These are all people that I respect in the space that do provide some good guidance. So when you start thinking about investment, we're smarter sometimes in herds, although there's always that Warren Buffett exception that seems to kind of have a natural affinity or nose for finding the right deals.
Well, he's a leader and gifted at
Exactly.
what he does for sure.
And within this industry, we don't have any Warren Buffetts. All we have is an Alan Brochstein or an ArcView.
Right.
There are a few other marijuana-based indexes out there.
Yeah.
They are
I
not.
follow RQ, NCIA, Cannabis, MJ Business. I follow all their newsletters.
And MJ Business is probably your 800-pound gorilla on the street as far as shows
Yeah, absolutely.
and activities. So their show this year in Las Vegas is actually in the convention center. It outgrew the Rio.
Yeah.
And last year, I mean, we've been platinum sponsors for several years, but last year they literally sold out the first day. You couldn't get a ticket to go in on the floor.
I know. I showed up in the afternoon thinking that like I could do like I'd done every other year, and I couldn't get a ticket to get in, and then nobody would everybody was so like excited and busy with it. I couldn't get a bat. It was unexpected.
And you still have other groups, the Cannabis World, Cannabis and Business, or World Expo and Business. Their group has been at Javits Center the last couple of years. They're interesting, but they haven't gotten the same traction that MJ Business. You have CBE, Cannabis Business Executive. That's Rob's group,
I do
and
that one too, right?
They do a pretty good job. We like them. We've advertised with them a few times, and they seem to be good players in the space. So, there are a lot of good web-based information sources that an investor should take advantage of. They should read up. They should subscribe to some of these. They should go on the websites. They should sign up for the free daily alerts. I mean, I get my CBE. I get my MJ Business.
Yeah, totally.
I get my Granjapanera. I get all those, and it's always good to read the stories that they're producing so that I stay a little bit more informed as both the CEO of the company and a person who naturally wants to be informed as to what's going on in the industry.
Oh, great. Yeah, we're working with some of those groups to do a column, a real dirt column on the cannabis industry. So this is now national, international even, right? You mentioned you're in 14 different states. There's, I can't even keep up with it, 30 plus states that have some type of cannabis law
29
on it right now. 29.
And there are 8 that have adult use, not including D.C., which has an adult use initiative that was passed. So you have 29 states that have cannabis-related legislation, even Texas, who I grew up in Texas, and
Texas even has it, yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
I mean, they used to, you get caught with anything, you'd
go to
be
jail for years.
Forever. They'd bury you into that jail.
Absolutely.
So to see
Georgia.
Texas actually adopt the low THC initiative for epileptic children, adolescents, was interesting. It's all they've done, and they only have 3 licenses they've given out, and that market is just so tiny, but it is a step in the right direction.
Right. You got to start someplace. Get your toe in the water. What's is there any state or concept that's really exciting for you right now?
California.
It's
funny.
I get it.
California passed legislation back in '96 for medical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And never got it promulgated.
No.
Never got it launched. Never was able to get the law put into motion. And then, of course, now all of a sudden, they, with the initiative that passed in
17
November,
years later, or 20 years later, right?
the adult use initiative passes, which is, to your listeners, we would always recommend you refer to it as an adult use product, not recreational. I did some recreational drinking once in college, and I was very bad at it. So I would always encourage people to refer to it as adult use product, similar to adult use beverage.
I agree.
The recreational is too Cheech and Chongy, too out there for me. It's no longer just a recreational element.
Yeah, we're gonna lose some of those terms. Recreational, marijuana. We're gonna lose that
cannabis.
term. It will be cannabis.
Yep.
It already started. We've been saying it for 20 years, but the past 2 years, everybody's using it now.
So in California, you have what's called conditional use permits that have been issued by local jurisdictions, cities. In some cases, some counties have weighed in to say yes or no. So you have this patchwork in California of all these different jurisdictions that have given some sort of nod yes to a grower, a processor, an extractor, a dispensary. You have the LA initiatives that were way back when, so you have the pre-ICO groups that survived and are kind of around. You have this completely interesting patchwork of elements that are now going to, under Lori Ajax's control, because the state just passed a new legislation here a couple of weeks ago that says not only we're going to get medical done, we're going to get the adult use done at the same time. So we saw some regs come out about 45 days ago, and we all began to get excited and look at them and say, well, if you'd fix this or do that. And then all of a sudden the legislature comes along and says, well, we think this needs to be done, at one fell swoop. So I think the various agencies now that are involved with the cannabis initiative are all ramping up at an even more feverish pace. I know Metric, I believe, well, not Metric, but one of their offshoots, I think, is going to be their track and trace
program. Yeah.
So the only state to have track and trace, most of the rest of us are seed to sale, but California's got to find a better description. So we're going to call it track and trace
there. Right. Absolutely.
So you're looking at a lot of things happening, I think, over the next 4 to 5, 6 months in California. And there's been a little bit of a gold rush, if you will, to investment capital and opportunities. I know we're working with several groups that have licensed or are using our Cultivation Max products, but we're excited for what that state's about to do. We believe that, if you know anything about the industry, California was one of the sources of cannabis from way back when, as it came over from whatever land race strains in Asia it sprung from. And
Thai, Colombian, Mexican, Afghan, Indian, all of it, right?
Exactly.
African, all came.
So it's made its presence known, and I think California's always had a strong reputation, especially Northern California, for outdoor grows.
Absolutely.
Humboldt County and the Emerald Triangle have very strong roots and connections to the industry, some legal and some not so legal, but
most private.
But it's funny, we've watched Colorado displace what used to be a thriving black market for California products back in the 2005, 8, 9, 10. Medical comes along, gets traction with the Ogden Memorandum in 9, and all of a sudden everybody's getting in the business. And what's happened is our market has grown to a point that we have legal access, both medically and adult use, that has caused that October, Croptober influence to be much less influential in Colorado because we have our own.
Well, part of it's the track and the seed to sale system here.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
There's less room for diversion.
There is. And while there's still diversion and there's still growing going on at that private, caregiver level, it has become a much more predictable market. And as a result of that, Colorado has seen compaction. We've seen the price go down because of competition. And it's really, Colorado's done a good job of letting the market forces drive pricing and product availability. So you have some wonderful companies out there. You have Incredibles, who make an incredible candy bar, and they have a great reputation. Rick and his team over there have worked hard over the years with Bob. And when they used to sit on the corner and beg for trim because they didn't have their own grows, but they have great Dixie Elixirs has good products, the Can Core, Keef Cola. There are a number of Mary Jane Medicinals. There are a number of great products out there that have gotten traction, but because that traction's there, we begin to find price pressures. And when we went adult use, you could find $4,000 pounds wholesale. The wholesale prices dropped to around $1,200, as I recall the last BDS update that I got this week. And it always runs nationally. There's always a delta between indoor grown, basically greenhouse or light deprived or modified, and outdoor. So we'll always see somewhere between $150 and $200 delta between each one of those levels. So the perception of indoor is that it's a higher quality, it's grown more consistently, and the perception with greenhouse is it is in a breathing natural greenhouse environment, which maybe is a little bit more difficult to control. And then, of course, you have outdoor, which is clearly subject to weather. I know the Northern California folks do not pray for rain.
Absolutely not.
A couple of weeks before their harvest because it can destroy their hard work for the year.
Right.
So,
or even all of the season, really.
Yes.
Right.
Then it seems like I hear that about every 5th or 6th year, you take a little bit of a whacking if you're an outdoor grower, but you're a one crop wonder and you do a great job.
It's farming.
And
you get
you
bumper crops some year, and some years you don't get anything.
Exactly. So in this industry, as you look at competitive influences and prices, I believe California market is still running in the $2,000+ range wholesale for a pound. And if it's really good quality, it'll be higher than that. But while it's trading at $2,400 for a good OG the platinum or one of the ones that people really like, if you get it out of a greenhouse, it's going to be $200 less. If you get that exact same strain from Northern California, it's going to be $100, $200 less.
Right.
So
Right.
there's always been a discriminatory market that is placed a higher value on those elements.
Right.
So as you look at
Specifically in
California,
California, they've developed that. They had the
it's
ability
national.
to discriminate.
Yeah, and I
Right.
think it may have sprung from California for all
Right.
I know, but I know that
Well, in the past, you couldn't discriminate. You got whatever weed you could get.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And then as it changed, you could be more discriminatory.
I'll pay a little more for something I perceive to
didn't
be a
like
higher
that.
quality.
I want something. Yeah, exactly. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I lived in California for 15 years. I still have a home there. I love Northern California, Humboldt County, and this adult use cannabis and the new medical cannabis are the fastest things that I've ever seen happen there. Nothing happens fast with laws at all. As soon as you get a law, you expect to have lawsuits to slow it down and stop it. And wow, man, the cannabis laws and infrastructure is building so fast right now.
Right.
It's incredible.
Well, and as you asked earlier, you said what state or where are we excited? Well, obviously Nevada launched recently and they were doing $1 million a day, which I was thrilled with. That's really good
money.
Well, it's only about a third of what we do in Colorado, but you know, it's still good money.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to remember, you have states bordering Nevada that people drive in from California to spend a weekend to gamble or game in Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
They're likely bringing their own vape pen. They likely have their
Right.
favorite strain that they've been buying for 5
Yeah.
years. And they may walk in a dispensary once to kind of do a little fun
See
shop.
it? Right.
I think the adult use initiatives in these states as they come online, as more and more states ante up and begin to have initiatives, you're going to find that cannatourism is going to diminish over the next several years because it's going to
Right.
become commonplace.
It's not such a novelty.
It's not such a hen's tooth or a novelty. So
what are we doing this weekend? Let's go to Colorado and buy a sack of weed.
Or
right?
let's face it, if I'm going to Nevada, 2 reasons.
Mhm.
I'm going there to gamble or I'm going there because there's a convention.
Right.
So most people going to Nevada, I'd suggest a lot of them are not cannabis users normally. And those that are will probably show up with some of their own product. But there's a lot of people that will want to walk in that dispensary and buy a brownie or buy a vape or buy their first ounce of weed because people like me who've never really, I do admit to use one time. My wife and I bought Zoots
Says
brownies.
he admits to it.
Yeah,
once.
well,
Right.
10 milligram brownies and our little cakes or whatever.
Oh wow, that's a strong dose for the first
Well,
time.
it didn't even affect me.
Oh, okay.
And my wife said she had funny dreams, but we were willing to experiment once, and so that's the limit of my.
Wow, if I eat 10 milligrams, it floors me. I just can't eat the ganja food like that.
Oh, well.
I like small amounts, but
Right.
I know my friends are making fun of me right now as they hear that.
Exactly. But once again, as you look at opportunity in the space, I think California is definitely coming online. I think Nevada will expand, and Nevada's going to be a good market. It may not be quite the panacea that people expect it to be with regard to tourism. And I think, in essence, I kind of have this feeling that Colorado has always been one of the bigger tourism markets, just like California.
Mm-hmm.
So I really believe with California's adult use initiatives, California will probably experience a much higher level of sales for an adult use for out-of-staters than even Nevada or Colorado have experienced.
Yeah, it's hard to consume cannabis in Las Vegas. That's one thing I've always thought about. It's because for years and years they've been so against it, and they've built the whole town around you can't use it really. I mean, it's hard.
But if you walk in, or if you're walking down any street,
now you smell it
within 50 feet of one to the other. Somebody's vaping.
Now you do.
Somebody's
now
using a little
do.
bit. But I think you're right. The hotels generally discourage that type of smoking, and in fact, I believe most of them have significant penalties.
Absolutely.
If you're using one of their rooms and now you can adjust. There's no odor. There's no problem with eating a medible or eating some sort of infused product.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the product that probably stays on the strip and is likely to be more accessed and more readily available through the dispensaries, whereas I think smokable flower still has to go a little bit further off the beaten path to actually be consumed or used or
it smells.
Yeah.
It's difficult to use.
It is.
And I mean,
and even a vape has a very particular odor
once
depending upon your oil.
Is, right. Absolutely.
You may look at somebody vaping and think, what the heck did I just smell? But it's not like a nicotine vape or one of the other products.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow, I love talking about cannabis. This is so exciting. Brett, this has been an awesome episode. Appreciate you joining me here today. I guess I got one more question for you today. If you could look in your crystal ball of see the future of cannabis, what's going to happen 5 years from now? Can you tell me what that is?
I would hope 5 years from now, the federal government has come up with a mechanism to manage and control or monetize cannabis on a tax basis.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that is medical only or a combination of adult use and medical, my hope is that whether it's the TABC or the alcohol, tobacco, firearms, or some alphabet soup agency.
Yeah, alcohol, tobacco, and weed.
There we go.
Right.
Or it may end up being that the edible pieces are Food and Drug Administration.
FDA.
And the agriculture is overseeing the growing part, and then
Department of Agriculture.
the tax elements are overseen by the relevant tax authority.
Sounds sounds
So
appropriate.
I think that if I had my druthers, I think the federal government would be a more effective steward of the product if they would look at it on a component by component basis.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Department of Ag would be an adequate resource to oversee and make sure that it's being done correctly. While they have a lot to learn, they don't have a lot to learn. The Food and Drug Administration obviously has been an effective organization within our state and our country for a long time. And I think if you legalized it and said, hey, anything that's infused or has a food grade element in it is going to be overseen by the FDA, and you'll have to be FDA compliant. I think that's an excellent position for the Fed to take. And then from a taxation standpoint, it becomes just okay, if it's medical, it's only 5% excise tax. If it's adult use, it's 15, and the point of collection is at the state and remittance through a normal tax channel that the Fed establishes. And I think that kind of deployment makes good sense. I think it helps getting it from Schedule 1 to, we would prefer it to be unscheduled or descheduled as people require.
Right.
Schedule 2, unfortunately, still requires full pharma oversight. So Schedule 2 without a waiver doesn't make a lot of sense, because you'd wipe out billions of dollars of infrastructure across the country and tens of thousands, if not 100,000s of jobs.
Absolutely.
So I think the Fed's alert to that influence. And while Big Pharma, I'm sure, looks at this industry as a potential, a downstream, none of them are going to risk their banking relationships or their current relationships to jump in too early.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really see Big Pharma being a big part of the industry until the Fed
absolutely
takes it on and says, okay, let's now bank it properly. Let's now manage it properly. And FinCEN and reporting requirements for state banks and credit unions have helped us to get banking. My hope is 5 years from now, the federal government has made some progress in how it integrates cannabis, just as it has adult beverages, just as it is done with other elements that we all use or we all have a proclivity for.
Right. Yeah, got to have that investment, got to have the banking for business to work right. Well, hey, thanks, Brett. I really appreciate your time this morning. I know you got a busy day scheduled still, so kind of do I. Thanks for coming.
I enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me, Chip.
This is Chip Baker with The Real Dirt. You can download this and other episodes at therealdirt.com and on iTunes at The Real Dirt Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for joining me today on The Real Dirt. Thanks, Brett Roper from Medicine Man Technologies. It's an incredible conversation with you. There's such high-level business going on in cannabis business right now, and you're a prime example of how people from all walks of life and all businesses can be involved in the new and modern cannabis business. Hey, if you like this episode, download it on therealdirt.com. You can also download this and other episodes at therealdirt.com and on iTunes, The Real Dirt Podcast. How many times can I say The Real Dirt, 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 The Real Dirt? Hey, I also want to thank our sponsors, Cultivate Colorado, leading the way in hydroponics and organic supplies in Denver, Colorado, and throughout the Front Range. Also want to thank growers, manufacturers of local Colorado potting soils and nutrients. Hey, thanks Denver Normal for leading the way with political action. Thanks again. The Real Dirt.